Tyler, you sound a little bit muffled.
I do, huh? Well, hold on. Let's.
It's better.
Okay, should be okay. Now let's check the tweets that everybody's sending in. Looking good. Okay, I'm ready. Cheryl, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm in Twitter space.
Okay, I see you now. Make okay. Song's almost finished here, and I got the Twitter open. Let's get the air horn ready. Does anybody have a story that they want to share before we get into the top 10 stories of the day? By the way, happy Thursday, everybody. If a May didn't say it already, let me be the first to say happy Thursday wherever you happen to be.
Happy Thursday.
Yeah. And
Does it have
I
to
saw you
be hot
shoved back to
news?
the audience. I was like, what's going on?
it's all good.
I thought there was like a tech news around the world takeover or something.
Yeah, the coup. Here we are. It's the coup. So yeah, it's Thursday. Sorry, I myself forgot that we start a half hour early. Believe it or not, that's how busy of a day I had. So but let's get into it. So if nobody has a hot story that they want to share, open mic style, then we will go through the top 10 stories as we always do. But before we do, we always play the air horn, which is right around here somewhere. There it is. And here we go. So,
Um,
yes, Messi?
no, I was just gonna say that it's not really today hot news, but one of the big stories in Africa has been the Pan-African payment system that's being piloted out like throughout Africa, but they did piloting in West Africa where they were trying to have, a seamless transaction in trading between different countries, and it was supported by the African Union and just rolled out by the African Import and Export Bank. That has been really a big one that they think is gonna just really, really move the African Free Trade Agreement that came into effect at the beginning of last year, and
Okay.
that this kind of cross-border payment and things like that would be facilitated. So that's it.
Okay. Well, I
That's
got
so
I've got one.
exciting, Messi. I'm so happy to hear that.
yeah.
Can I share one?
Go ahead, Piotr.
Cool. It's not politics, don't worry. It's about Clubhouse actually. It was an article in the BBC saying that women facing rape threats and abuses in Clubhouse. I mean, this probably isn't anything new for some users. You know, this is internal discussions that have been had, but I think it's quite interesting that this has sort of come up again in the news. And it was in India. It was written by their Indian correspondent talking about the experiencing that some women are having on the app and what they feel is a lack of sort of action by those in positions of power. So they said that while the problem is and still rampant, it's also cropping up less so on other things like Twitter. So an exact mention of Twitter Spaces there. So just thought I'd share that because it's about the app we're
Is
on.
it
But that's
is
all.
it from is it the source is the BBC or what?
Yeah, I can send you the link.
I think I have it. So it's from 2 days ago, and the headline says the women facing rape threats and abuses on Clubhouse. Right? Is that the
That's
headline?
the one.
Yeah. It says 1 day ago when you open the story. I'll pin it to the top of the room because I want to discuss this article, but not for the reason people might think. So I just pinned it to the top of Clubhouse. Cheryl, if you would please pin it to the top of the Twitter space for the friends listening over there, like our friend Clinton, who glad to see is back, and Katie, who I'm glad to see is back, and Valerie, and the regular gang over there in the Twitter space, and we got the regular gang over here in Clubhouse, and that's all groovy. And we're gonna do what we do. But thank you for bringing this one up, Piotr. And I'm this is an opportunity for us to have a multifaceted conversation about something that we ourselves know quite well, which is Clubhouse. So that's here's an opportunity to talk about something that we all know somewhat intimately. And The headline says the women facing rape threats and abuses on Clubhouse. Now, that's the headline. So notice, and there it is now pinned to the top of the Twitter space, where it says in Twitter space at the top of the room, the women facing rape threats and abuses on Clubhouse. Now, obviously, if you don't use Clubhouse like we do for hours a day, every day, you might assume, oh, wow, you're going to make some kind of association between an app that you know don't have any kind of intimate experience with and women facing rape threats and abuse, and you're going to think, wow, that's pretty screwed up. Like I thought Facebook was bad. Holy smokes, this Clubhouse thing must be off the chain. This must be out of control, right? Yet it's obviously not an everyday kind of a normal thing that women are experiencing rape threats and abuses on Clubhouse, and the BBC felt it appropriate to write the article. Let me continue here, because the point I want to make is that the social audio is a new format of engagement between users, right? It's Paul and Rohan cooked up a whole new way of engaging, and there, the Marshall McLuhan phrase of the medium's the message, and it's a new means of engagement. You could think of it like a new game. There are lots of different sports. There's lots of different games. There's Uno, there's checkers, there's chess. Checkers and chess look a lot alike, like on a board. It turns out they're actually very different. My point is that when you make subtle changes, you get dramatically different changes in how people are able to engage. And the issue with a text, social media used to be primarily text-based before, historically. You could think of Facebook, obviously, or Twitter, obviously, is very text-based. Now, the moderation tools that exist today work very well and are optimized for, and a lot of research has been put into building moderation tools for text, specifically for this reason. And there is a lot of moderation going on in Twitter and in Facebook. Now, we are not operating in text. We're operating in voice. And it is far, far, far technologically, we could almost say impossible to moderate algorithmically based on audio to address human behaviors. Because the point I would like to make is that humans, 1% of humans are psychopaths. 1% or 1/10 of 1%, so that's 1 out of 100 are psychopaths. 1 out of 1,000 are batshit crazy lunatics who will say absurd, asinine things to people of other sexes and races and all of that. So when you have an app, as Clubhouse has, with millions and millions and millions of users, you're going to have dozens and dozens and dozens of batshit crazy lunatics, right, who will say things like that. And the inherent challenge is they're saying it in audio form, and it's a bit tricky to police. Obviously, Clubhouse doesn't want those people on there. If Clubhouse had any knowledge of those people being on there, they would do their best to remove them. And it's unfortunate that this is a new technology, a new platform, a new game, and it's going to take a minute to allocate the proper resources to build the right moderation tools. And similar to, we're 10, in some cases 15 years into text-based platforms like Twitter and Facebook, and we're still have a long way to go. And that's a far easier format, text versus audio and voice, to moderate, and we still struggle with it. So I say all of this to paint a big full picture of how new platforms develop, how many years it normally takes for the moderation tools to come into play, and the nature of humans to be jackasses in life in general. So, for example, there are people, jackass idiots, making rape threats and abuses in every city in the world. Now, Could I go to Los Angeles and say, hey, Mayor of Los Angeles, you have people making rape threats in your city. You're responsible. And they would say, what are you talking about? Similarly, Clubhouse has more users than most major cities in the world. So I say that as just to give a comparison as to just how much responsibility should we put on the platforms for policing the users within it. Over time, of course, there will be tools built to address it, like we said with text. In this new nascent, barely over a year old, we're coming into just over a year. We're in the middle of year 2 or whatever of this technology. I believe, still acceptable that the moderation tools are rudimentary at this stage. So that's the end of my rant. But feel free to tear it apart.
Hey,
And
hey,
No,
let
but
me.
I
I'll
want
jump in
to
on
add
that.
to
So
that.
the so with, oh, you go ahead, Peter, since it was your article.
Okay, thanks, El. No, I just no, I personally I want to make it very clear when I'm showing the article. I'm well aware of the uh, early stages that this app is in. I only joined 6 months ago, and I feel like I've been on it for a while, but it's still less than 2 years old, and I'm not even that tech savvy. I'm probably the least tech orientated person in this room. But I love this app, and I think it's incredible that I've been able to meet so many people on it. Um, so I certainly do think there's a certain amount of responsibility that rests with the user. There's only so much emphasis you can put on the team at Clubhouse to do everything. Unfortunately, I run political rooms, therefore inevitably I've had my fair share of hatred. I've had death threats. I've had my mother's picture used in a PTR to bait me into a room. I've had all sorts of deplorable activities done. But at the end of the day, you've got to be vigilant of who you engage with, avoid BS rooms and the conspiracy-esque kind of places that, unfortunately there are those areas of the app which are difficult to clamp down on because people can quite easily get a burner phone and recreate an account. The one thing I do think that could be improved a bit sooner is the blocking system. There was a discussion a few days back about this black badge that appears, and whilst it was useful in the earlier phases of the app, I think it's become, at least from what I've heard from people who've been on here for longer, it's become a bit of a liability because it means you can block people out. It's used as not blocking to not see you again, but it's used
A
to like
trolling tool.
getting into, yeah, exactly, preventing you to get into rooms, which is a pain because there are people that I want to block for plagiarism. They copy my content, which I don't like, but I can't because I share platforms with them. So it's like, what do you do? But anyway, that's all I've got to say. Thanks for letting me share this.
Oh, no problem, Piotr. This is Al. I was going to say though, with this whole like abuse thing on there, I agree, Piotr. There is a certain level of responsibility with the people, and remember that Clubhouse is just a delivery system for us to share our content and our thoughts. It's not up to them necessarily to do that, but the consequences, we have to realize that anything that they put in place, of course, is going to be rudimentary, but it's just a tool. The AI, just like anything else, can only funnel but so much. And if somebody is reporting, they really need to have a team to go in and investigate. I know that they're very small right now, but we still need that human interaction. If someone is saying that there's something wrong, they have to do their due diligence. And it'll get to the point where saying that they're a small group is not going to be an excuse. They're going to have to actually show and improve and actually show they're doing a concerted effort when someone is reporting abuse, whether it's a woman stating that a guy is doing something, or a man saying that he's being, pigeonholed because of some of his views. Because remember, this is all about healthy, we're supposed to be having healthy conversations and, and just civil conversations, whether we agree or disagree. So, because personally, I don't have anybody blocked, but I most definitely have a black badge because I'm not a pushover and I don't let anyone talk to me any kind of way. So, I mean, there's certain rooms that I can't go into. I was just telling Cami I couldn't get into the room, the memorial room that they had for the young lady in NYC yesterday. And I knew everyone on the stage, but there was a speaker on there. Unfortunately, that has me blocked. He never goes into any of the rooms, but he was there, so I couldn't go in. And I feel like that is just unfortunate and unfair. I also messaged Clubhouse and gave them several suggestions of what they can do about that. like if there is someone on the stage and it is a public room and it's not their club, you blockers should not be allowed to block. Like for instance, Tech Newsroom, this is your space. You guys are the admins. If that person blocking is not an admin or a leader in your club, their block has nothing to do with it. As long as you're not going into the social rooms with that person, then it's whatever. But if it's not their club, this is it. But I haven't heard anything from Clubhouse. And I will say that is a problem when people are speaking out, people are giving suggestions, and they're being deaf, dumb, and blind to it because they're in like rush mode. They're going to have to get it together at some point. I'm Ellen. I'm done speaking.
Yeah, and to that point, I think, particularly from the women's point of view, it's particularly distressing. I've had many a conversation with female friends on here I've met, and or not just like, non-binary or whatever, but the amount of hate that they get particularly is I think disproportionate to what I receive. I just get a fair amount because I do political shit, but people can just speak out because they're a girl and they have an opinion. There's a friend of mine on this app. She like you doesn't take any shit, and good on her. But she gets a hell of a load of things like, she's a bitch, she'll die alone, she's useless, she shouldn't have children. I mean, some of the things she's been told, it's just disgusting. And I do think that there should be more. Like, there's a community now on here to support women. Because of that, and I think that that's an unfortunate, but as Tyler does say, it will occur anywhere as well as in this social audio space. And this technology is so innovative that it's we're learning as we're going. So it's we've got to work together as well as pressure in a nice sense of the word. Remind them that there need to be ways to improve moderation, reporting, etc., etc. But anyway, I'm going to relinquish the mic.
Yeah, responsible reporting.
Exactly.
This is the one time Clubhouse they should be in here. They're here every other day, but they're not here now. So it would be great if they could hear our
I
concerns
mean,
and our suggestions.
we had a topic yesterday, 24 hours ago, about social volunteer juries. I think Clubhouse would greatly benefit from a clubhouse courthouse where around blocks, and it'd be fun content to listen to. I mean, people
Are you
love.
going to be our Judge Judy, Tyler? You're going to be Judge Judy?
I'll be Judge Judy, but I think it'd be better if there was 20 or 30 of us. Like, I mean, we are a rather diverse group of speakers in this particular tech news around the world, more diverse than most. But I would love it to be even more diverse, especially under the context of like a clubhouse courthouse, where we're a bunch of geeks, and that makes us very non-diverse. We're one kind of bubble of society, and we might be very well suited to addressing issues related to tech, but and hell, why not? If anyone's got a, let's do it that way. If anyone has a tech-related grievance that they need to settle with somebody else,
Yeah, I have one now.
go ahead, Cheryl. It's our first
Remember,
case.
Tyler, when you first came in, you were right in the audience and not on stage, although I didn't do anything. I have another example now. Look at Mabwana.
Uh-huh.
He's not in the audience. He's supposed to be on stage automatically.
I invited him up.
But who's the
I
plaintiff,
know,
Cheryl?
but he's
Who's the
supposed to be
plaintiff?
on stage automatically, so it's a clubhouse glitch. It's not me.
Who's the plaintiff? We got to get
Sure,
somebody in here.
it's just a joke, Cookie.
No, I'm just messing with her.
Tyler, can I share a couple thoughts?
Sure.
It's David
Yeah.
on the Clubhouse side. So this experience was done 20 years ago in Yahoo chat rooms. It was audio chat rooms, and it was very different times in the age of internet. So a whole lot of it was certainly not civil discourse on politics. It was the opposite if you can go back literally 20 years. But let me offer something where and I appreciate you kind of giving us some sense of what percent or kind of the population we would have to moderate. But I would just simply suggest that there were moderation of games, any kind of social texting, as you had mentioned. The percent, there's a couple orders of magnitude off, is I guess what I would say. And so it is a fundamental problem. Let's say 10 to 20%. I remember some study with regards to to females getting the same kind of text abuse, and just not even just text abuse, just in game. Um, it's not just that small. So I would just simply to reframe that, say it is a kind of a part of your what you need to wrestle with when you're doing business, right? And so I think the blocking thing is a really great opportunity for them to just define two or three, four levels of blocking. And for anybody listening on the Clubhouse team, just create three levels of blocking so you can manage the how we're using the app a little bit better. But I guess the one last thing I'd like to close with is, yeah, the tools are on the way. It's just something that should be prioritized a little bit more. I mean, they see the numbers in the churn, right? I'm sure that they're doing some level of trying to find out when people are leaving. They're doing some kind of research to get a sense, to get their head around how big a percentage and all of that, to size up the problem and all that. But it just in my experience across all this social stuff, it's not the 1% or a fraction of one. It's kind of a leg on the stool that how big a problem it is for women and getting abuse and stuff.
I think they've
Thanks,
Yeah, it's the
Tyler.
troglodytes of society. That's literally what it is. And I mean, as women, I mean, I love you all and stuff like that. And I know not everybody could be the same or cut from the same cloth, but it's also too, at some point, you have to speak up for yourself too, and I highly encourage that. Don't let anyone get away with talking to you any kind of way or saying anything or putting fear in you, because when you give them that reaction, then that's what they want. And you don't want that. I'm just fortunate that, my father raised me, and I actually, had a lot of male mentors that, I have thicker skin than most women. So things don't, things kind of roll more off my back. And, people know the same energy you have on Clubhouse, it better be the same energy you have if I'm in person. So the ladies, just take care and, be upright and stuff. Don't let anybody push you over, no matter what.
And Valerie in Twitter Spaces wanted to jump in, I think. Valerie? Oh, shoot, my mistake. I gotta make sure. Hang on, Val. Sorry. I gotta jiggle. Here we go. Can you count to five, please?
Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There you go. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tyler. I appreciate it. I'd like to bring this back to this all comes down to unwanted attention. And, in generalities, women have gotten unwanted attention. And so it's about, before we jump to tactical on all the things that can be done, is how do we work with that? There's no question on Clubhouse, once the invite went away, and then it was opened up to more users, as far as Android, you saw more folks coming. And I think they interpreted that Clubhouse was also a dating site. With I think suggested followers, I see several outreaches each week. They have not been ugly, but they do say about wanting to meet or just saying hello, and you read their profile and they do say that they're on this app looking for a relationship. So I think it's not understanding, let alone your purpose and the purpose of the app. And I will say I'm also a LinkedIn person, and I have seen some uptick on that platform. So I don't think it's unique to Clubhouse. This is Valerie, and I'm done speaking.
Right. That's my point. Is it's unique to human nature. It's not even unique to India, which this article's about. And although, I mean, it's weird that the BBC would decide to kind of mention. I'm reading the article now, and they do mention that it says, while the problem was and still is rampant on Twitter. Okay, right. Well, then put Twitter's headline and name in the headline as well, because you're basically doing reputational damage for clicks. The clicks that are going to happen on this article being shared are related to the fact that you used Clubhouse's name in the title. And if you didn't, that would minimize the clicks. What if the title was Women Facing Rape, Threats, and Abuses in India? Yeah, well, no one's going to click that. So you're using Clubhouse's name to get yourself clicks, when in reality, later in the article, you even mentioned that it's an even bigger problem in Twitter. So what are you doing exactly here as a journalist here? You're this is
I completely agree, Tyler. And I think the point for anything, any kind of unwanted activity, whether you're male or female, we have to report it to the app, whatever app we're on. That's the only way things stop. We come across it and we don't take the time to report, so it continues to permeate the platforms. This is Valerie, and I'm done speaking.
okay. Anyway,
I would also say that there is a specific India. I think the interesting thing about India was the government requested a specific. I can't remember the name. Was it a support officer or community officer
yeah.
that nowhere else has yet? So I think that that's maybe something that could be looked into as well. But because of India's size of the user base, that's an interesting element as well. But that's all.
So
So
the Tyler, the difference here, sorry, the difference on Clubhouse is that it's an audio app, which is differentiating it from Twitter, which is mainly was before the Twitter Spaces, like messages and the internal, the inbox messages you can ignore. You may choose not to read them because if you don't know that person, you can change the setting to not receive messages from unknown people. The difference here on Clubhouse is even the fact that Elle was mentioning to have the admin the capacity to block. What about the people who follow you around everywhere, wherever you go, come on stage, talk over you, and kind of are aggressive um, despite of you not responding to them over and over again. So the ability for somebody to pop up on stage and say something directly to you is what makes the experience completely different from Twitter.
Hey, Aaron, but that's where moderation comes from. If you have a good moderator, whoever has that green bean right now is Cheryl and Tyler, and they should be monitoring the situation. They should not be allowing that to happen. I know any of the tech spaces, any of the co-working spaces that I create, I do not let anyone get belittled. I mean, let alone I don't even let it happen in here. Sometimes, I speak up and ask people to like chill out and not talk over each other, but we all have to do our due diligence. The app is just another delivery system for our voices to be heard, and it's up to us to at least do to do the housekeeping. Oh, go ahead, Peter and Anne Marie.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Hey, hi guys, and Elle, thank you for that, and thank you for always having such a mother hen type outlook and voice in these rooms. I don't think it should ever all just fall on Tyler or the primary mods to step in as needed. I think Tyler, though, your part of your point in responding to when Piotr raised this was it's a lot of this is just simply about perception. And the reality is, Clubhouse is an entirely novel thing still, as compared to Twitter and the other platforms. And so, headlines such as that really can do, they can really do some harm and be perceived in a entirely different way than, say, when Twitter or any other medium launches. In an audio version as they have with Twitter Spaces. And my one quick example of this is Tyler knows that for quite a while last summer, we were talking to a high profile elected official about coming on and talking about some of the issues in the tech news space that are really relevant to what a lot of our headline discussions are each day. And I know for a fact that staff that advises this particular health official had their concerns, and this is before the first headlines had come out by about maybe a month or two on these sort of abuses or cultural issues that were happening within the Clubhouse platform. But I was in having a meeting with this same office not all that long ago on a completely different issue, and the response was like, wow, we're really glad actually that we held off on jumping in and doing something on the app, because right now would really disassociate ourselves with something that has this sort of profile and targeted media attention that it's had recently, like it would just be a non-starter for certain people to jump in and have a Q&A or be part of a room on Clubhouse when they're already just have a little bit of information about how the platform worked in the first place. But if their perception now is that it's just a bunch of nonsense where people are literally being abused or harmed, then it's a complete non-starter. Now, I forwarded the question beyond that to say, like, well, what would be your thought about doing something on Twitter Spaces? And that was an open discussion. So that's interesting, right? And Tyler, I'm sorry I haven't followed up with you on it directly, but that was a real conversation that happened 3 weeks ago.
Remind me.
Hey Tyler, this is Netta. Remember when a while back you were talking about, maybe it's a good idea to have some of these platforms um, identify people, to really for us to give our identities and just make sure. I mean, obviously, we don't want to have that shared. And yes, there's always a question of them getting hacked and so forth. But for the most part, we have all these people. I mean, I agree with what Valerie said. I agree with Ella said, and we have to be vigilant as women. We have to be careful. We've had this back in the day before social media. A lot of the women we've dealt with minor versions of it in our workplaces, in streets, in all areas of our lives. And a lot of us, most of us, hopefully have learned how to kind of be vigilant for ourselves and protect ourselves and stand up for ourselves, especially when needed. Growing up in New York, especially, we had so much of that, just, being cautious. But now we've got all these people, all these men, and I have to tell you, I mean, I've had several cases in my own story where I don't know these people, but I became friends. I've met some incredible friends due to social media. It's not just a Clubhouse thing, but just, all in general in social media. I've met some wonderful friends, men and women, through Clubhouse or through other platforms. And yet, you always have some doozies out there, which I've known some guys that, completely seem normal for 1 or 2 years, I think 3 years. And, within one or two messages, they realize that I'm not maybe interested, and completely the attitude changes. And, I can blame some of that on this keyboard. Um, what is that called? Keyboard.
The keyboard jockeys.
Keyboard jockeys, or no, there's keyboard
Help.
courage. So they get, you got all these people, some people that get this keyboard courage, and they come forward, and there's a bit of comfort knowing that at the end of the day they're protected because no one really knows who they are, where they live, what they're about. So I think, Tyler, wasn't it you that, I mean, didn't we have this discussion a couple of months ago, maybe, where maybe it's not such a bad idea for these platforms to really have the identity. We need to identify ourselves. If you're going to go into a place where you're going to have access to all sorts of people, and if their security or if their safety comes into concern, then maybe it's not a bad thing for the people in charge of that platform to know who who their followers, who their members are in there. So, but it's it's tough all around, and for all the other women, listening in, it's just, we have to, at some point, we just have to just kind of be vigilant for ourselves and to stand up, just like Al said, stand up for yourselves, because you're teaching people how to behave with you, how to, how far they can push the limits. And I'm sorry that there's so many good men out there as well that they're getting a bad rap because of these doozies that are out there as well.
I
Yeah.
agree with you. Women have to stand up for themselves. I try to create very safe spaces and don't tolerate any disrespect in my rooms, and remove those people from stage immediately. But I also have to acknowledge my male friends who are there to support me, because a lot of times when women communicate something, it does not convey the same message to some male, selected few. And for that, I'm thankful for my male friends who are there to give me that strength and support that I need in that moment. So it's a collaborative effect, a collaborative effort, and we cannot just expect women to develop thick skin. We need to develop a sense of community and groups where we can all stand up to these negative behaviors and collectively discourage such people. It's not only women's job.
No, no, completely true. It's just that the narrative most of the time is that the onus is just on the men, which most definitely it is because it's their behavior. But also, too, we have to, there's not going to be any best way to put this because I don't want anybody to misconstrue what I'm saying. But also, too, we also need to get out of the savior complex as women as far as being princesses and stuff. I mean, I don't know if everybody probably gets what I'm talking about or what culture and stuff, but some of us are raised to expect that someone's going to come save us. And we also, we need to think, if no one's around, we're going to have to take care of ourselves. And I'm not saying like, no one should be punished and no one should be held over the fire for their actions. But we also have to, stand up as well. So that's why it's a two-pronged approach. There's community, but if the community isn't there, you have to take care of yourself. Just like as a mother, I have to take care of my kids. I can't look for anybody else to raise them the way they should be. But I'm hoping people from Clubhouse, if you're out there listening and stuff, that you really need to maybe pull some of us in, have like a user conversation. I don't know if they have conversations where they actually reach out to like key users, people, not just the people in the popular rooms, but people in the smaller rooms, those people who have been blocked and those people who have blocked people, and ask them about their experience. Do, get some case studies, get some user stories so they can figure out how to improve the experience. So I'm hoping their project and product management team is doing something to that effect, because if you want to improve this app, you need to engage everyone at all levels and not just because they have a huge following.
Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity for a PhD study of some sort to take a very academic analysis to this problem, because I think we do have to balance kind of protection with rehabilitation or punishment. It's not always necessarily the case that we can use just very blunt tools, but I definitely agree that supporting and protecting women online is important.
I think just like an onboarding session would be quite useful. So when you first join the app, there's like a brief guide on how just to be a good user, and if you plan to moderate rooms, a guide on how to be a good moderator. I listened to a new and I forget the name of her co-host, on lessons on moderation. It's an hour. It's quite interesting. You hear real life cases, and I've taken on some tips from that. And the other thing I think is, just as a guy, like, I call out shit when I see it. I don't like it when I see other guys being abrasive to women. Particularly, there was one room I listened to the replays of about a certain issue, and someone was rather aggressive to someone else in this room, and I told that person I didn't really think that was cool, and they should address that. So, being an ally, I know it sounds, some people like cringe at that word, but like, I do think that is what it is, because men can be quite aggressive to women, and I think we should, support women if they're not feeling confident enough to do it themselves. Not in a sort of that women can't do it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with calling people out. I don't agree with this culture of like, let's not call this person out to protect them. I don't like, sod that. They're being a dick. Like, call them out. They deserve to be notified of their actions. Sorry, I feel quite strongly about this.
Okay. So
Kudos to Tyler for having all these great guys in here. I've met many of you as friends, not met, but have been connected now, and I've learned so much from so many great guys. And Tyler, it also shows, again, I've said this to you in the past, and I'll say it again, for you moderating and hosting a great room, and also create these parameters of how to behave, and for all
well,
the men that have been here
yeah.
now for months that have gotten a chance to hear you guys and learn from you guys, and some of you have become friends now, just kudos to you guys as well, who are setting the good example.
I'll tell you this though. I've crossed over the line of decency multiple times myself in this room, and we had a history earlier on in the first several months of crossing it on a nightly basis. Honestly, so it's and there was no less decent people then than it is now. It isn't even about that. It's just the culture of the room at times gets a bit, rocky. And anyway, so I don't mean to be passing judgment on anybody. The weird part of that article is there is a bit of, it is very Indian, that article, that BBC article. The issues that they are dealing with are, in some no minor part, are related to Indian politics. Actually, that's talking about the bad actors in those clubhouse rooms are pro Modi folks that are being very aggressive towards uh, people who are anti-Modi, for lack of a better word, or not pro-Modi. And that turns that into a very Indian political article, of which Clubhouse just happens to be the place where these knuckleheads just happen to be manifesting their buffoonery. So,
Yeah, absolutely correct. The journalist who wrote this is Patel.
well, I mean, but the interesting point is the whole issue has more to do with the fact that Indian politics has found a place to manifest its wackiness. And because it's a brand new platform that is developing and hasn't yet built the robust moderation tools that the others have, that are 15 years ahead of them, and happen to have the luxury of being text based, which is far easier to moderate. Yada yada yada. Anyway, so
Is this going to be a period of giving Modi an excuse to ban Clubhouse soon?
see, Cheryl, thank you for saying that, because that was actually one of the interesting thoughts that was going through my mind, which is this a for those who follow tech news regularly, months ago that Twitter was in the crosshairs in India. And India had their own local domestic alternative to Twitter. And it looked like India was gunning for Twitter and would have been all the more happier if Twitter were to shut down in India and they have a domestic replacement ready to go. And Clubhouse, I think India might be one of Clubhouse's biggest markets. Wouldn't surprise me at all. This is becoming common for Western apps, that India becomes their biggest markets now, because they have just so many incredibly the volume of users is truly unbelievable. And it might be the case that, again, where this is an example of yet where a country would prefer to have a local domestic startup, that they control geographically and politically, rather than an American or foreign tech company. And that's a really interesting thought to keep in your mind as you read that article. So we will go now through the top articles of the day. Happy Thursday, January.
Yeah, I actually sent you an article because I know you were like, was there a burning article? I sent you one about the trials for 6E in Turkey.
Oh, got it right here. Turkey trials Wi-Fi 6E to lay foundations for connected something. Right here we go. Turk
Oh, and
Telecom.
also AC has his hand raised. I had messaged Cheryl. AC does.
Okay. It says Turk Telecom said Wi-Fi is vital to its success and that the trial demonstrated the 6E real-world performance benefits from municipalities as well as consumers and enterprises. Turkey trials Wi-Fi 6E to lay foundations for a connected future. The 6 gigahertz spectrum. By operating in the 6 gigahertz spectrum, blah, 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 the bottom. Yeah, good. Yeah. Good to see Turkey making gains in the Wi-Fi space. And then who was it that had a hand up?
Well,
Hopefully,
that explains when the Wi-Fi
AC.
has been so bad in the last couple of days. Then
okay.
Yeah, they've been, AC has his hand raised.
He's already on stage.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. So the top story today is from the Financial Times. They say they have sources that Meta, formerly known as Facebook, is working on plans to let users create and sell NFTs on Facebook and Instagram. Show NFTs on user profiles and is considering an NFT marketplace. So we can now add Facebook and Instagram to the ever-growing list of sites that are enabling NFT creation, distribution, trading, etc., which, again, I have to assume, and feel free to jump in, diminishes the role of the early players like OpenSea and whatnot. When you start getting all of the behemoths, what happens when Google and whoever else, Apple, Facebook, what have you, start competing in this space? And they have Twitter, by the way, is also letting you have your authenticated Ethereum based NFTs as your user profile in a authenticated way, in a kind of beta form at the moment. And what happens when Facebook does this as well? They'll make it easier more friendly, lower costs than OpenSea. You get my point. So, yeah, there's a bunch of people tweeting about this. It says Facebook's parent draws up plans to allow users to create and sell non-fungible tokens, seeking to enter hype-fueled $40 billion market.
Well, I think it would be a good thing if they combine that with the identity verification efforts that they're kind of pushing for. So there is a lot of scams and that sort of activity within the crypto space right now. So if there's any way to kind of not necessarily regulate, but internally verify or anything like that, then I think that would go a long way in legitimizing it. Purely, if not for the fact that Facebook has the ear of banks. So money equals momentum, and competition, I think, is a good thing. We saw that with Apple and Epic Games. So I expect that probably after Facebook does this, Epic Games will do this, Microsoft will do this, Sony will do this. I suspect it'll permeate across all aspects. But in general, the NFTs seem to be something that offers an opportunity for artists and creators, which wasn't necessarily possible before, an opportunity for you to monetize something without necessarily being at the mercy of some sort of large organization that is going to set the terms for you, right?
Hey Tyler, this is JT at Twitter Spaces over here.
Go ahead, JT.
I talked about this concept last February 2021 when we're sort of in the hype of NFTs. We were starting to get into the hype of it.
Yep.
Just because I saw that it wasn't Meta back then, but Facebook had sort of the ecosystem in place that would allow for something like this. So they obviously have, an established marketplace, and then as we forward back into November, we heard about Horizon Marketplace being something that they're planning to open up, and I sort of see the whole aspect of wearables and being able to present products that you own as NFTs in the metaverse. And then they also came out with like Instagram subscriptions. So you think about like people who own NFTs. It's all about access and experiences. So if you can somehow incorporate the aspect of owning an NFT and you have access through that subscription to either the creator that you're subscribing to, or even like on the gaming side where you're streaming the games and you're sort of giving coins, you can incorporate the NFT aspect into that. Whether you own sort of that subscription to them and you have some form of access to that particular creator. They have like this whole entire interconnected ecosystem at the moment, but I think it's going to be mostly visible probably once they release their desktop version of their Horizon Worlds, which is a metaverse platform. So they're looking into integrating that with their VR headset. So if you just combine all these multiple, I guess, siloed components into one with this NFT sort of, I guess, ecosystem as well, it just opens up a lot of opportunities for them, but it also sort of it makes people angry on the other side as well, because you have a corporation coming into a new ecosystem that is just in contrast to the philosophies and practices that they adhere to. And it's one of the reasons why people sort of migrate to OpenSea and migrate to the decentralized side. And it's just going to be very interesting to see how they navigate these waters, because they're making this move for only one reason, because they noticed that this new entire ecosystem is a direct competition to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be dabbling with something like this. They see sort of their I don't know, their market share, if you will, lack of a better term, sort of being impacted by a whole new plethora of users just moving away from this corporate owned again ecosystem. So that's the way I analyze it from afar, but also going into the sort of the on the ground kind of nitty gritty of how, from a business aspect, they could really leverage this as much as possible to benefit them on their business side. It just makes sense for them to get into this.
Yeah, I love your point about the metaverse, which is obviously at the forefront of their mind with everything they're doing. And NFTs in the metaverse itself is kind of a no-brainer, really, and a really interesting thought to have. And then I loved Eric Io's point about the identity verification aspect, because that's happening concurrently, separately, yet simultaneously, and in concert with this as well. I mean, that's one of the things that NFTs is about, is proving who owns what. And you're going to need to be able to prove your own identity in these networks in the near future anyways. And so it's all right on time between identity verification, metaverse, NFTs. They all kind of are forming a what's called a concrescence, as any dentist knows. That's when the roots of your teeth start merging into each other. But it's applicable metaphor for when technologies start merging into each other. So the next article, shall we, is that Google launches a limited beta of something called Google Play Games, which brings Android games to Windows 10 and Windows 11. There you go. Google and Microsoft buddying up yet again. Next up is this summer, the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, the Tax Collection Agency of America, will require users to log in via ID.me. Well, that didn't take long. We were just talking about identity verification online, and there it is right there. The IRS is going to force users to log into ID.me, which uses facial recognition in its authentication process to file taxes, make payments, and more. Did I not say this was coming? Have I not been eluding that this was all going to be coming down the road in the not so distant future? Well, here it is, folks. Online tax filers will soon be required to submit a selfie to a third-party identity verification company using facial recognition tech in order to file their taxes or to make IRS payments online. Starting this summer, users with an irs.gov account will no longer be able to log in with a simple username and password. Oh no. No. Instead, they will need to provide a government identification document, a selfie, and copies of their bills to Virginia-based identity verification firm ID.me to confirm their identity. That change, first noticed by Krebs on Security, marks a major shift for the IRS, which previously allowed users to file their taxes without submitting personal biometric data. In a statement to Gizmodo, the IRS said users can still receive basic information from the IRS website without logging in, but added they would need to sign in through ID.me to make and view payments, access tax records, view or create payment plans, manage communication preferences, or view tax professional authorizations. So here's how filing taxes will work for most people later this year. Users attempting to log in to their accounts using ID.me will have to create an account with the company by uploading either a driver's license, a passport, or a passport card. Users are then told to use a cell phone camera or their computer's webcam to take a selfie. According to ID.me's website, the company uses a facial recognition system to verify the selfie matches the provided government document. If approved in ID.me's system, users then use the credentials to verify their identity across any of ID.me's partners. Oh, you mean like all the social media websites? Yes. Do you see where this is going? Do you see where this is going?
Hey, Tyler, can I give you, though, a different vantage point on this?
Sure.
Okay. There's a lot of fraud with the IRS in terms of like certain things like the earned income tax credit. And so not only cheating the government, sometimes people cheating other people, meaning they're claiming stuff on other people. Okay. So they're trying to prevent fraud. I know that everyone's probably going to say, no, it's because they want to sell your user data to Facebook and Instagram. But there is a lot of fraud in this stuff. And where this came from, I believe, is that again, this isn't a kind of an American thing. But when we had all these programs after the pandemic, the unemployment, the PUA, all the support programs, there was massive fraud. Like, I mean, not like a little fraud, like massive fraud. So a lot of states are using ID plus me to curb that fraud. Okay. So I mean, I don't know what else you want them to do. I think probably they shouldn't have partner sites. That's a problem. Okay. But the fact that they're asking you to use your passport, your driver's license, and facial recognition and all this thing. I mean, that's really a good thing for to protect people's identity, to protect people's money, and also to protect the government from getting scammed. But I mean, there's tons of people, by the way, who were entitled to unemployment benefits, and people stole it from them. Okay, because of ID theft and stuff. So there is a flip side to this, and I'm done speaking.
Yeah, in Canada, they actually had banks as a ID partner for logins as well as voice verification because of the rampant, I guess, fraud that occurred when Canada said, "Hey, we're going to give everybody $2,000 a month because pandemic." And so that was an example of, hey, we got to have much more strict security here.
So I'm not opposed to this. By the way, the question is, it'd be interesting to do a poll of the people on stage or in the Twitter audience to see, do people want, because by the way, that Clubhouse article that we started off with from the BBC in India, you could put an end to that very quickly if everyone knew that their identity was, double, triple dog verified. You would not have people acting like jackasses. And so you could solve a lot of the problems on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and everywhere. Child predators on Instagram, you could pretty much kiss that shit goodbye if every user is triple dog verified. And because they just wouldn't risk it. People are using fake accounts, obviously, when they do, bad actor type behaviors generally. So, yeah, there's a huge plus side to having everybody identified. And by the way, Korea has known that for over a decade. Like, this is just
Singapore also have this thing called SingPass for decades, and it's
right.
actually, of course, it's managed by the government, and it's very convenient. They also have collaboration with some banks that you can actually just use that system integrated into the bank to actually have your ID verification as well. It's very reliable.
Right. Well, it's, by the way, Singaporeans and Swedes, most of all, will be generally fine with this, actually. And there's, as I said, there's plenty of upsides. The concern is in places where Turkey comes to mind, governments that arrest their citizens against their will for doing things that they don't, that's where things get very dicey. And
But
so,
the problem already exists there in those governments for that reason. So, and I should also point out, I think this is only if you use the IRS website itself, the IRS government website. You file your taxes through TurboTax, and a lot of people do. I don't think they're requiring that. From this article, it doesn't sound like they're requiring it on the third party providers like TurboTax or H&R Block. It's only if you use the government
yeah,
website.
funny how the IRS is like, oh, you know what we need is facial recognition. But oh, wait a minute, you're a cafe using facial recognition? No, 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 good sir, that's totally not allowed.
I
So
know the
Yeah,
IRS right now uses smart cards where they have like the little chip that's in the card. They use it on the employees and stuff. And I was wondering, instead of maybe doing facial recognition, if there's pushback, if eventually, because I went through the smart card when they were introducing it when I was in the military years ago. They were trying to put everybody's information on a card. But maybe, if everybody has their own little unique, I don't know, watch or some type of identifier, they'll use something like that if there's pushback on facial recognition.
okay, so then, by the way, the CEO of ID.me was in a room with Nicholas Lyons and myself, and many of you will know Nicholas is quite a wealth of knowledge on the topic of identity verification, digital especially. And I remember the founder or CEO of ID.me, being blown away with what Nicholas was doing and working on. And I've never seen somebody so excited in a social audio room, in fact. And yet, when he realized what company she was with and that it's a centralized system, he said, "Well, that's great. You're excited, but you're the bad guys. You're trying to centralize all of this, and that's not going to work." And so, it was a very interesting conversation. The next article,
Tyler, I have a question. Why U.S. government don't do this system themselves? Because ID.me is a company, right?
Because it's
So,
predicted in the Bible and the book of Revelations that they will, and you'll get every Republican in America predicting that whoever implements this is the Antichrist.
oh, okay. Because yeah, for companies, if they have the decision how to use this data, isn't it more dangerous than what you said right now? Okay,
The, the,
I got
the,
that's
the,
because
the,
our government do it because we have an ID card from our birth. So that's how why we control the pandemic so quickly because you have everything linked to your ID. So if you have travel history, then you will found yeah you'll be quarantined according to that. So that's why I have this question: why the government don't do it themselves?
well, the United States doesn't have formally a like an ID card for its citizens. We all have social security cards, but technically you're not supposed to use them for ID. And even though like people and even private companies started asking for social security numbers, even particularly when you're applying for credit, and that's led to some scams too. But technically, we don't have. There's a opposition in this country to having a national ID card. They actually were seriously discussing it in. I mean, this is just history, but like in the late '80s, when Ronald Reagan and Congress gave amnesty to a couple of million illegal immigrants. Part of that deal was that they were supposed to create a national ID card going forward, so the borders would be better protected. And all of a sudden, there became a political opposition to having a national ID card, similar to for this, why people don't want to wear face masks and don't get vaccines. There's a tremendous libertarian streak in a good part of the United States, and that probably explains it the
Well,
best.
there's the libertarian streak, and then there's the evangelical streak as well. Because, as I was trying to say, those who grew up in a Christian household are all too familiar with the incredible hair-raising scenario of the state um, knowing too much about your identity and using it for your financial transactions, and that's predicted very rather in a bizarre kind of hallucination that Apostle John had in some cave, on the border on a Greek island 2,000 years ago, in writing. So it's a very interesting prediction slash prophecy that people have been watching with incredible interest for decades, if not centuries. And when we start getting into these um, Amazon Go, where you pay with your hand. In fact, that's what is predicted, that you will pay with your hand or your forehead. So it's
I have a
Tyler, when you
question, Tyler,
first
but isn't that what the new ID is for? For those who are in the U.S., there's been an effort for the past 2-3 years. I didn't before I left the county job I was doing. There was a project called for new IDs, and it was for part of that project is or one of the goals is to one make sure everyone they're not having this fake ID. Everybody should be vendors or companies will be able to subscribe to some like system that has a barcode that scans your ID to verify that this is a real ID, but it's also eventually going to contain most of your information. So, and then the next rollout will probably be that ID, the new ID that states are pushing or requiring all drivers to get or state ID holders to get will roll up into the national ID eventually because there's like a code inside that new ID.
okay. So
That's my
Nicholas, our friend Nicholas just joined the stage here in Clubhouse. And Nicholas, I was just sharing with the class my memory of the some of the senior team members, including the CEO from ID.me, in a room which I recall was a rather small room, and the exuberance that the CEO of ID.me had for your views on self-sovereign identities, and yet uh, ID.me is clearly centralized, and you had to break it to her that she was not fighting the good fight after all, if my memory serves me correctly.
But ID.me,
I
do I
remember
have to
that.
use it to log into the OPM website for the veteran site or any of those things? It's such a the user experience for ID.me sucks and it needs to
Hey,
be
Tyler,
improved. So they need to
Tyler,
fix it before they roll it out.
Tyler, just to
It's
roll it back
total.
one for 2 seconds. Sorry, Nicholas, because I'm sure you'll take it off into a fascinating direction about identity. But when you said the reason for this is, and you said because in the book of Revelations, I started laughing, like, yeah, it's a joke, you know. And then I think actually I'm sufficiently green and ignorant about the world that I have just realized, are you telling me that the US make political decisions based on what's written in the Bible, just to be clear?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, thank you. That's cool.
Up to
I shall
thirty
continue.
percent of the up to
I sh-
30% of the electorate probably does.
Holy crap.
That
Okay,
goes back to
thank you.
prosperity. Yeah, that goes back to the prosperity gospel that infiltrated the government. I think back in the 1920s and 30s, it was so corporate entities could accrue more money because it was frowned upon to like be, it was frowned upon in government for those people to actually have wealth. But then there was a push or some type of program um, to push more, well, it's pretty much called prosperity gospel. I could share the link of the book that talks about it, but it happened in like, I think the 20s and the 30s.
Okay. So back to my question for Nicholas about ID.me.
Yeah, yeah, I do remember meeting her, and I do remember that she was very knowledgeable about identity. But as I pointed out to her, if your identity is owned by a corporation or by a government, then you are not self-sovereign, and that her business model would have to be exploiting the human's ID information. And this IRS facial recognition scan is exactly what, I was warning about, because if the government decide mandate that you have to have facial recognition in order to pay your taxes, confirm your social security number, um, credit history, etc., you are basically moving into the full surveillance state. And as everyone knows, these are issues that are dealt with in America via, I think it's the Fourth Amendment, and they have something called the third party doctrine. And so governments in the in the US, or in those who are trying to still maintain an idea of freedom and liberty, will allow for companies like hers to provide these services, and then say, well, once you've given that information to ID me, we can use the third party doctrine to surveil you. And so this is the back door by which, we were talking about China the other day. This is our backdoor China social credit system. It is going to use the third party doctrine, and it's going to use the greed of people like her who think that they're doing the right thing, who believe that they're helping, solve an identity problem, but what they're really doing is building an invisible prison cell for everybody to be subjected to state surveillance and effectively skirt the Constitution. And this is
Yes,
why we
Nicholas.
need a public version of this that is using zero knowledge, that is able to provide that information to the IRS with equal veracity using cryptography, but not requiring your face, and not requiring necessarily, and not requiring the underlying data. What's even more worrying is, of course, the deep fakes that we've seen, where it will be extremely easy to spoof these facial recognition systems anyway, which has happened over and over again. So it's not even as secure as you would like.
So, but
Hey,
you,
can I just explain for the room what the third party doctrine is? So your constitutional right to privacy and not being surveilled, the third party doctrine is an exception to that. So if you share your information with a third party, so the idea was that it's sort of like a breach of confidentiality. If you share your information with a third party, it's no longer confidential, and the government has the right to look at it. But this is starting to apply in the tech world a lot more, and with uh, unintended circumstances such as this. If you give your ID to a third party, it also would apply. Say you're putting your documents or anything else in the cloud. You've now given it to a third party cloud provider. So all of this stuff in the legal reviews needs to be updated, or the interpretations need to be revised, because this third party doctrine is coming up in many different instances.
And just
100%
as a
agreed. Most
matter,
people are unaware, and this is why I always say we have to use democracy. You will not be able to defeat these forces without a truly self-sovereign, private, people powered technology, because you need that to say, why can't we use this? That's number one. And then you have to say, well, in that situation, you no longer, the government, have that power just to arbitrarily surveil your population.
And just as a demonstration of how quick and easy it is to do a deepfake, if you pull to refresh, you can see that my face is on Tyler's persona, so I'll change it in a moment. But that just goes to show that perhaps even face identification will require something more than just two dimensions.
But yeah,
Oh, your face is so smooth.
this
Yeah, so Jennifer, thank you for explaining the third party doctrine. So if I understand you correctly, if I use my iPhone, if I use my fingerprint on my iPhone to log in, then the government has access to my fingerprint. Is that correctly? Is that correct, Jennifer?
Any
Um,
information you disclose to a third party that you've
well,
given them access to.
you've given that party access to. I don't think Apple's going to actually do that, but it's again the right, the constitutional right to privacy. That is the way it is constitutional. If you want to be what do they call the literal look? But it's again, if you're um, that those rights aren't keeping up with the progress in technology, right? So if you are you they could assert that you gave your fingerprint to Apple and now that they can get access to it, or they have a right to surveil that via Apple. Apple themselves is not going to give that over. So that's a good question.
Not unless the law changes, Jennifer, right? So
They
if the
right,
government was to change
right.
and it was to get an autocratic government that didn't believe in, the protections that we have constitutionally, then it is highly likely that the president, and we've seen presidents before, will pressure a CEO. Now, Tim Cook may not give
Right.
it up, but a future CEO may well give it up. And
Well,
so the law
they
will
already do
enable that.
that. Yeah, they already do that. To your point, the government, this is all emerging, and so people do need to be very cognizant of it. And we need to, it's not only change the law, it's reinterpret it, because again, you're not going to amend the Constitution if people just want to look at how difficult and rare that is. But again, that was a very different world and it's very challenging to apply those rules and keep those protections forward with the way that's written. There are doctrines called the equilibrium doctrine, which is how do we interpret that in the current world and try to maintain those privacies, as you're saying. But again, these are all these aren't something that's set in stone or absolute. Again, an autocratic government could come in and push and go no, and again in the physical world this happens as well. The right not to be surveilled. Now we have drones, we have planes, we have drones, we have cameras, we have blue light, we have everything else that can easily see you. So do you have a right against those? And again, this is all under review, or yeah, constantly under review and discussion, as Nicholas is pointing out.
Hey, but the fourth, Jennifer or Nicholas, but Jennifer, you're a lawyer, so the Fourth Amendment is there's always been allowed you've always been allowed to get subpoenas. I mean that's essentially the government just can't come in and take your papers and do it. It's a search warrant issue, okay, generally. But if they have a court order, then they can get it. They've always been able to get it. Um, and so with a third party, the issue has been in the past. Apple has actually been better than most other companies. That when the government shows up, they'll say, "Give us a subpoena." If you don't have a subpoena, we're not giving you anything. Other companies, apparently like AT&T, the minute the government showed up, said, "Oh, whatever you like, here it is." So, I mean, that actually you could change by statute by saying to private companies, you just can't release people's private data unless there's a court order or a subpoena. And that would probably deal with the Fourth Amendment issue. I would actually, my understanding of the Constitution, by the way, to the extent there's a constitutional right to privacy, which, by the way, is very disputed in this country, as people know. That I think the court, basically, it's like the reproduction cases and the abortion cases. The court found that in the, I think the Ninth Amendment, like as an unenumerated right, as opposed to the Fourth Amendment that generally is more about like search warrants, if I'm not correct. So
The
you want to
Fourth
comment?
Amendment, you're right. So the Fourth Amendment literally is your, as you said, person and papers, right? So that's what existed in the 1700s when they wrote this. So everything's digital now. How do you bring that forward? So again, as you're saying, there's interpretation of these, and it's case law. You could bring it forward by statute. Again, would the government pass? Would the Congress to make a federal law, because you'd need it federally, or would it have to go down to each state, which we see a lot of that getting pushed down? But would the federal government come in and restrain themselves, and would we get anything through
No,
Congress saying you can't do
no.
something? The other one is, yes, Tim Cook, you have companies like to have the government come in and require them to do something under law so that they don't have to make this stance. They can say we were complying with law. Apple is, or we were, a subpoena, which is, they can't obtain that. The Fourth Amendment is against unreasonable, isn't it? I think it's the unreasonable searches and
It's
seizures.
unreasonable means that a judge
So,
you just can't go
right,
to a judge and say I want a subpoena. You have to justify why you want the subpoena. That's
right,
the yeah.
right.
But
Good. And it's more background there. A lot of people don't dispute those. So back in this was, I think, 2 years ago, one of the Ninth Circuit judges told me, he goes, no one ever disputes these. So the judges did start limiting them by geo or by person, because the prosecutors would come in with these absurdly broad subpoena requests that so and no
Yeah,
one
John Doe warrants. That's what you're talking
would,
about.
so
Yeah.
well, John
so I would.
and by massive groups. So, anyways, they have started to restrict those. But again, if the government requests it and goes to the company and gets it, which is very easy to do, and goes, other companies roll. Apple does not roll on those. Apple has been more protective, and this is again part of their persona and values and what they're trying to advertise about protecting.
But but that's a fake. That's a fake front, because we
Right,
know that Apple
right.
does it because they've got this pretend view to privacy, but it's not. You don't have that privacy. They know everything, and they use all of that data. But they've got a marketing front that people have bought off on about privacy. What happens is the government then goes outside of the U.S. jurisdiction, like it always does, and skirts Apple, and Apple knows it's being skirted, particularly by security hackers in you know uh, Israel and various other places, that get round the security provisions that Apple says that it can't negate. And the other thing that it brings into question is, of course, the Fifth Amendment, the right to not incriminate yourself and to remain silent. Of course, if the third party doctrine enables the government to surveil everybody. And by the way, let's look at the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill, as it regards crypto, is exactly designed to implement TPD, the third party doctrine, across every financial element of the realm. So if you look at the Financial Action Task Force documentation and what they're planning on the one hand around the banking system, we talked about the US dollar hegemony, the way that America exports its brand of democracy via the dollar, and it does that via control of the banking system. And the banking system is now aligning with the identity system. And even here on Clubhouse and on Twitter, that identity information is KYC AML documentation. And that disclosure of that KYC AML documentation is going to be pretty much at the root of every single prosecution that will be brought for wire fraud or for anything else that they want to use, including a securities legislation that is so broad that it will capture everybody that is in their sights. And then the power of the law will be brought against you in order to stop you doing anything which limits their newly found um, uh, godlike powers. There is absolutely nothing you can do except at the moment, except understand that all the information you disclose over the internet is essentially theirs to use against you, regardless of whether you've done anything wrong or not. And we have seen these cases in Denmark where they use geodata to incriminate people, and the geodata was wrong.
Well,
And
Nicholas,
it was so compelling
the
to say, well,
Fifth
how can the
Amendment, the
geodata be
Fifth Amendment protections got
fingerprints being
frittered away a
wrong?
long time ago because they could the courts have said they could force you to give your fingerprints, whether you want to or not. They could, if they can force you to, take a blood draw if they suspect you of DUI. So, I mean, that's all. They're all forms of self-incrimination. So basically, we've got to the point long before we got to crypto or all this other stuff where the courts have basically said, other than not being forced to literally testify against yourself verbally, anything else the government can do, as long as they've got some due process behind it, and so therefore they could, again, they could take your
Indeed,
they could take your
indeed.
fingerprint if
Evan,
you're arrested.
they
But the
can
only
get
reason I raised the
information,
crypto
but
is
they
because
cannot force a blood draw. They can. You can opt out of that. However, what you are going to take, and it's you are going to basically be getting the same thing as a DUI. You're going to be getting a no contest or something like that. So your option, you can not have the blood draw, but your option is then to basically be found guilty by way of no contest or something. But anything back, there's another theme that Nicholas brought up, which is that also you've got to look at pragmatics here. So actual security of things. So anything that you put out on the internet and your phone, again, probably auto updates to the cloud, all that stuff is searchable by nefarious sources as well. So hackers and anybody else. And whether Apple, there's vulnerabilities everywhere. So anything that's out there is find outable. Now, whether the government can legally use that, they can definitely get it. And then Nicholas is showing how it can be legally obtained. But again, people need to think pragmatically as well. It's like when you have a contract, you put a contract in place, or I have a certain right. You have to think, okay, that's great, but what pragmatically will happen in this world? Like, what is the actual relationship? What is the technical
I
ease?
think
I have a
the
question.
only way, it's just to answer that, because it is worthwhile saying, because these are the issues that we've been waiting a year and 20 years for people to realize, that the only way you can be safe is to realize that you don't own your iPhone, you're renting it, and it's their hardware that you're enabled to access. The only way in the future is that you would actually be owning the systems that we use collectively that have protections built in, like zero knowledge privacy. And my point of connecting this to the crypto world is that it shows that the government is there, and the government will act to curb innovations that we
Yeah.
have that are designed to empower our self-sovereignty, because that is them losing power. So it's, the reason to go for a protocol or to go for a technology is not only because it's good, but it's because it can be argued that it is people powered, and it's not owned by Joe Lubin and Vitalik, because that will make them subject to, at some point, securities sanctioning, right? And something like Bitcoin did have a fair genesis and is truly decentralized. So it's, these nuances are in the legals, right? It's, if you can be self-sovereign and you can be a conscious agent, you can elect better leaders, and you can protect the evolution of democracy and liberty. If we don't, you will be subjected
Yes.
to legal loss.
Yes, but the IRS desperately needs to make sure that when you're paying your bill, you're not some um, you know crazy person giving them money who isn't who you say you are. I mean, this is obviously a high priority that the IRS needs to have facial identity of the people paying their tax bills. Yeah.
Exactly.
Can I
Yep.
have a question?
Just want to insert one thing. The more pernicious thing is that when you have an API, and the IRS has an API, not many people know this, but they have an API, and when you need to access the IRS API in order to get a mortgage, in order to get a loan, you will be forced, because otherwise you won't be able to get access to that capital. So it effectively implements surveillance via the back door because of this. You see, it's not just, oh yeah, we need your face to speak. No, it's, if you want to access the money market, you will need to provide this, and that
And
will
not just
give
this,
us the
Nicholas.
right.
I
Yeah,
think
but
if you want to move around okay, that means Americans can resist about all this biometric, about this facial recognition to be so-called registered by your government, as in authorities, right? But if you want to travel, wherever country you go, your biometric data will be taken by those authorities anyway. So are you trying to say that you do not want your government to have it, but you don't mind other government to have your data?
No,
Like,
I
for
don't.
example, if you go to Singapore, you go to
No,
Japan,
no, no.
whenever you
I
come
think
in, you get your fingerprint scan and your face
yes,
taken.
of course, of
This is
course. So
100%. Yeah.
there's information that you have to give, because that's the state that you live in, or that's the state you choose to visit. But there are the systems you choose to use that are not self-sovereign and not people-powered and not using privacy technologies. In the future, I would hope that we will agitate for the right to
preserve these um, human freedoms that we've worked so hard for. That's why we had a Declaration of Independence. That's why I advocate for a digital Declaration of Independence or a Declaration of Digital Independence, whichever way you want to set it around. And we need to understand that when people who are duly authorized and duly elected ask you for information, if you want to access that service, you will need to provide that information. It doesn't give them carte blanche to know about everything else in your life, whereas at the moment it does. And so you can hold, just like when you meet someone, you don't have to tell them all about yourself. You tell them what you want to give them in terms of information, your most intimate secrets, but you have control of whether you tell them about your intimate secrets. So we need the same human freedoms in the digital world as in the physical world. And when you choose to bow to duly authorized authorities, you give them the information as requested. The difference
Yeah.
is how you manage that identity, how you store that data, and the rights you have to prove that if it is verifiably cryptographically true and correct, and that can be notarized by the government, and then you can receive their signature, because that should be the mirror reciprocity that you want. I received a signature that I came to that country. I got the digital signature that proves I was there, etc., etc. All of that is what our law stands on. Because if we can't be sure of the data, then you can run a tyranny. And that's what we've seen, is people using technology to effectively remove their competitors. We see that in countries that have already allowed for those rights to be compromised. So the question for us in America, or places where democracy is still somewhat functioning, is how do we take back the control of the information that enables us to elect better leaders who will make laws that care about our sovereignty, self-sovereignty, and our conscious agency being able to understand the information that is held in those publicly stored ledgers of information, of data.
This
If
is
we
And
do,
so.
also,
so
This is
this is
so.
Tom. This is
This.
Tom. You do realize,
Tom, hang
okay?
on.
You're
Tom,
talking about with
Tom,
this.
Tom,
Yes.
hold on.
Yes.
Tom. I know you're one of the newer kids in the class. We have a long-standing ladies first policy, so when there's a lady's voice, we always yield first. So I did hear somebody. Was it BB?
Thank you.
Okay, it's maybe
yeah.
it's a very quick point that as a foreigner, sometimes the ITIN number issued by the IRS can act as a security number. So I think that's one of the reasons why they need this facial recognition.
Okay, Netta.
I also I
Nina.
also wanted to add that what Nicholas is talking about is going to be even more important with like brain computer interfaces and the access to our thoughts, which I think it's coming in the near future. So the kind of laws and the kind of frameworks that we decide to fall back on right now is going to be crucial also for the future, when that access to those like that really private data is going to be available, like on the level of your actual thoughts, not just the things that you store on your computer, but the things which are actually like in your head, because the possibilities for abuse are just incredible in that respect. Because if you're a government and you have access to the minds of your citizens, you can literally control them. You can if you have access to their money, if you can control like when their money is not when it has like a sell by date or things like that, and you can control their thoughts, like where is freedom then? So I fully agree with what Nicholas is saying, and I would say like even to look to the future and think about the consequences for how technology is going to be working not too long from now as well.
Yeah, Neuralink.
So
Netta.
here's another thought. Okay.
Don't do it.
Don't do what? I'm just going to say, with between metaverse, AR, VR, and now trying to do facial recognition, all of this data to make a lot more hackable points. As new technologies come out, they're vulnerable for 8 to 10 years until they actually start securing that information. That's the running state. So if the IRS thinks they're using, biodata to get in. I mean, this stuff has been hackable for years. Okay, we've been doing it from the red team perspective for facial recognition, for fingerprints, you name it. I mean, what's next? Gattaca? They're going to do DNA samples as we walk in the door?
That's
Yep.
already.
They will already have that
I hate to break
from
that
your
to you.
vaccine data. You know, you've done DNA, RNA.
Yeah, some of us are working on that exact kind of technology.
I
So
think there's one thing that's worthwhile pointing out at that point, which is that not only have we said we need to own the tools so that we're not renting iPhones and we're not renting and we are the product on other people's systems. We all know that now. Not only do we need to be able to be self-sovereign and understand the information that's coming to us via the perception field of our eyes or our ears, which is being controlled by historically the media, but now user-generated content platforms where you can be deplatformed for having an alternative view. So we know all of these things are definitively coming. What we need to be able to do is somehow unify into that comprehension so that we can build the next generation of systems that empower us and doesn't, outsource it to these behemoth companies. And that's what we need the right to be able to do, I think.
okay, going into the next topic. Instagram subscriptions launches, initially letting 10 US creators offer their followers paid access to exclusive Instagram live videos and stories. And here's the direct from the horse's mouth. Instagram helping creators earn recurring monthly income on Instagram. And if you're thinking of what was the porn subscription website? OnlyFans. Then give yourself 2 points. Because it'll be private content unless you're paying for it, obviously. And so this does open the door to do soft porn, perhaps, in some capacity.
There's a
Creators,
giant amount of porn on Twitter already, which is
right,
completely ungated and unsupervised.
right. And by the way, Twitter recently added subscriptions, and now you know why. Instagram and has to, because now there's ways for creators to monetize on some platforms and not others, and that's going to force the creators who want to monetize onto certain platforms. So Instagram has no
And
choice.
you
Yeah,
and you'll note that OnlyFans was deplatformed from its primary banking provider, and they
right.
put their members on notice that they would no longer be banked. And then at the last minute, a neobank came in and banked them. And I think this is an issue of free speech. I don't see why they should be targeted, but the reason they are targeted is exactly the doctrine that we've been speaking about, which is that if you don't speak up, what happens is one of the polarized minorities, in this case, the religious right, campaigns Visa and MasterCard. And because Visa and MasterCard have got so much business that does not involve the million people who are working on OnlyFans, that's their job, really, oftentimes. And they effectively put pressure on Visa MasterCard, and Visa MasterCard make the deplatform effectively those people and those businesses. And the question is, why? Why don't they have the same rights? Well, they don't have the same rights because they do have the same rights, but the provider of the service will not stand up to the economic pressure because of the value of the other part of their business. And I think these are where, again, this sort of like the third party doctrine applied to economics as well as to the law.
Okay, so in this Instagram subscribers, there's 3 basic functionalities under the subscriptions. One's called subscriber lives, meaning live streams, so creators can broadcast exclusive live streams to their subscribers, allowing them to engage more deeply. And then there's subscriber stories. Creators can create stories just for their subscribers, allowing them to share exclusive content and to use interactive story stickers, blah, blah, blah. And then badges. Creators can see a subscriber badge next to comments and messages so they can easily identify their subscribers. While the features will only be available to a limited number of US creators during the initial test, we have plans to expand access to more creators over the next few months. If you want to see subscriptions and actions, you can follow and subscribe to the following 10 lucky individuals who are the first 10 creators who you can pay money to can follow their content.
Hey Tyler, just
yes, sir.
JT over
JT,
here. So I'm not an official creator for Instagram, but I am a content creator. I create augmented reality and virtual reality content. But it's interesting to see how, I guess, Meta as a whole is starting to now finally realize that the creators ultimately have the power here, and sort of, in a way, taking the baby steps to cater to them, right? Because before we sort of didn't see these incentives or monetary systems in place. We started to see with the streaming on Facebook from gamers, giving the ability to give like tokens, not the cryptocurrency token, but the other form of payment. And now we're starting to see that in the metaverse with respects to Horizon Worlds, where they have a creator program of $10 million, giving those who built out their worlds $10,000 in this competition, whether you're in first place, second place, third place, and now we see Instagram with the subscription model. So it's very interesting to see this pattern of these creative programs being developed over time, because they kind of understand now that in order to scale up, at least from a metaverse perspective, right? I know this is sort of a unrelated topic to the one you shared, but nevertheless, they understand from that standpoint that in order to scale up their world building capabilities, they know they're going to have to rely on the creators to essentially develop all these worlds, because in our current state of metaverse virtual building, we don't have the artificial intelligence to develop these worlds at scale yet. And so the aspect of being able to personalize your world and invite communities to them that are generic, authentic, and sort of speaks to the individual or the brand, really provides a lot of value to the overall ecosystem. And so I can see why they're sort of pivoting to now um, giving, I guess, creators some form of monetization abilities, because without this, they have competition on both sides, right? On the Snapchat side, Snapchat introduced the Spotlight creator program, and then TikTok has, I believe they have their own. I'm not too sure about the TikTok one, but we're starting to see sort of this pattern evolve over time, and it's probably going to get even more, I guess, robust in the metaverse, because they're investing a lot of money, and they need a lot of creators to sort of adopt this 3D and spatial sort of mentality. And I think that's one of the most difficult, I guess, skills and in demand skills at the moment. And so it's going to be interesting how much they're going to pay and what kind of structure they're going to have aside from what they have at the moment in place, the ones that I just described.
I actually, I'd be interested to see if this thing that Instagram is doing and other platforms, excuse me, I'd be curious to see if it's going to backfire or not, because in places like OnlyFans or other platforms, people are joining and they're walking into a subscription model um, application, for, website, whatever. So they're walking into that knowing what they're doing. I'm curious to see how this is going to play out in the long run, because I'm already imagining that a lot of these people are going to wind up taking some of their major shares, or whether it's musicians, their music, their updates, or whatever they had, they're going to wind up keeping some of the the gold nuggets for the people that are giving subscriptions. And what's going to happen is that all those that aren't, that are currently getting all the updates and shares, they're going to wind up seeing that the people they're following is starting to get more non-active, or that they're not sharing as much as they used to, and they're going to wind up just losing interest. So I think, I'm kind of foreseeing that this could potentially not be great for creators at the end of the day. I think what they should be doing, I've got an artist right now that's got almost 8 million followers who's not monetizing any format. Different story. We're talking about sanctions, and it's an Iranian artist, so it's a specific story on that one. But I think what they should be doing is giving people. I bet you if they just leave some kind of a tipping um, add-on to these sites, or just something so that people can kind of keep their dignity instead of asking people for any kind of money or funding or support. Just have something there that people can sign up to, that if they want to,
every time they see something, or if they feel it, or if they, are seeing something that they want to support, they're tipping that artist, they're tipping that, creator, whoever the content is. And it could be, and I guarantee you, they'll probably wind up making more money than they thought that they would make by, instead of getting the subscriptions. Because what you're doing is that you're telling all these people that if you're not paying me monthly to hear what I have to say, then I'm not going to share with you with who I am. And it just kind of goes counterproductive on the whole idea of this whole social media platform.
Right. However, this is where I think Spotify is going to just destroy everybody, because Spotify, for a lot of people and music in general, people are accustomed to paying for music and access to music, where they aren't accustomed to paying for your Instagram photos, for example. And Spotify has millions of artists, and the dynamic is such that you have millions of artists and quote unquote creators or music creators who have their audiences already, who are already following them on that platform in a very organized fashion. And those artists could now, because Twitter's doing super followers, Instagram today, that's the headline today, Instagram's launching their version of super followers, which is paid subscribers. If Spotify were to launch paid subscribers for fans to exclusive, previously unreleased content, so that the artists could upload their rehearsal tapes every single day, if you were a big fan, or they could do live performances, which is their version of live streams. So an artist does a live stream in Spotify, and you get to watch them do their live stream their rehearsal or what have you, or in the studio, or do a Q&A session, or sing you songs and happy birthday songs and all kinds of shit. Music artists could now start monetizing greatly through Spotify. I think Spotify's in a fantastic position because, as you said, it does seem a little bit odd to be, it's not conventional to pay for social media content in this kind of a way, where it is very conventional to pay for high quality musical content in the form of songs and audio and whatnot. So uh, I have to imagine Spotify is working on this as we speak, and when they announce it, I'm incredibly excited for the future of music and musicians and being, audio creators, so to speak. Which, by the way, isn't limited to only music. You have podcasters as well in Spotify, and you have audiobooks and social audio in their platform. By the way, which, by the way, there was we didn't even cover this, but as predicted by some bald white dude who has a rather good track record of predicting things, our friend, I believe it was Jane Wong from Hong Kong, found the proof that Spotify is going to integrate their live audio channels, which is currently in a standalone app called Green Room, if I remember correctly, into the mother native app, which has hundreds of millions of users and has an audio ad network, which podcasters are going to love, because when you upload a podcast, even your historical podcasts that you did over the past 20, many, 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 many months, Spotify could say, would you like to turn on ads for all of these hundreds of podcasts that you've previously uploaded? Oh, sweet Jesus. Yes, I would. Thank you very much. And so you can start monetizing your canonical content and future content and current content and live streaming content and, podcasts and music and audiobooks and social audio, like what we are doing right now. So again, for all those reasons, I really feel like Spotify is uniquely positioned to benefit disproportionately.
I mean,
Tyler?
I love Spotify. I love what they're doing. I love, I've been, a fan of theirs from the very beginning. I think what they're doing is great. I'm just saying that there's a lot of people that are not taking in consideration that impulse buying, impulse purchases, impulse gifting based on something that they see or hear that is moving them into, some kind of an action. Or if they're, they see something, they hear something, they, whether it's a music or song or content or podcast or, whatever it is, a creator. I can't stress enough that these people are not paying too much attention on impulse purchases, on impulse. People are moved through a song, they're moved through a photo, they're moved through a share that maybe hits something close to them. And I guarantee you, if there was a way where they could easily just say, hey, click, I just gave this person $1 50 cents, $500, 1,000, whatever it is, it'll probably far exceed any of these other monies that they can get on these subscription models. I guarantee it, because they're just not counting on these people. I mean, impulse buying is a huge thing. Just look at yourselves. How many times did you see something? Did you hear something? Did you see a film or hear music, or someone shared something on social media that moved you into tears, whether it was good or bad or just something that moved you, that if you could have at that moment tipped that person, and I don't like to use the word tip, but if just kind of nodded at this person for acknowledging what they just did or shared, I guarantee you they would be making so much more money than anything that right now they're talking about. Because then, you kind of feel like these people are getting subscriptions. Some forget that they have it, some don't. Some people just phase out of it. Some people feel like they've just been completely, disconnected by that creator, artist, whoever that they're following. But if you had the option of just give these people some dignity and just saying, hey, listen, if you are following me for a reason, then maybe there's something that I'm doing or saying or creating that you're interested in. And it could be moments where you're actually the impulse urge of wanting to show some love and some support to that creator of the content or to that artist. I mean, I think it's a disservice to these people to not give that option to them, because I think they'll probably wind up making so much more money than these people imagined. Anyway, I'm
I
done.
I
Can
think
I?
that if I could just add something to what Neda was saying, I think that the subscription model is something that's going to benefit the biggest influencers, and like the biggest personalities on Instagram. You can imagine having, somebody like, say, Kim Kardashian, or somebody who is putting out content on such a platform that people just love and want to follow. Like, if that content is going to become, just limited behind some kind of a paywall, people are still going to subscribe to that, because those biggest influencers have their, loyal base of fans who will want a piece of that action, of that content. But I think it's going to marginalize like the smallest influencers. So the thing that Neda was saying about a tipping jar, like there's two things actually that I wanted to say about it. The first thing is that there's a cultural difference. There are some cultures which love to tip and which will, want to give something to these influencers that they follow and that they want to look at, which is kind of the case of what you can see in China. And there are
Absolutely correct.
countries And there are countries where tipping is not part of the culture, and people will watch and they will feel like, they have the right to see that content because they're used to it. This is kind of what the publishing industry has, been having trouble with for the longest time. And this is why in the publishing industry, it is the ad model that works in most cases. We see that shifting now because of the, it has in the end led to a lack of quality content. So there's not enough supply of quality content. There is a demand for that quality content. So the people who basically can supply that quality content, what they've done is, they've decided to give it behind for a subscription, so behind a paywall, basically. It's the same thing with Substack. Like, why people subscribe to newsletters on Substack? It's because the people who are creating those newsletters are people who are creating basically quality content. The problem is, who wants to pay for quality content? Will people pay for entertainment? Can Instagram have the kind of entertainment subscription model let's say, Netflix? If it was a subscription for Instagram, so you get access to everything on their platform for a certain fee, perhaps yes. It's the same kind of thing, that YouTube is testing for getting rid of ads. You don't get to see ads if you pay, basically, right? But the problem is, if you're a small creator, right? If you're somebody who's trying to live off of creating, posts about a niche topic, let's say, veganism or I don't know, a specific kind of, say you have celiac disease or whatever, and you're an influencer who creates posts about the kind of food that you can eat and creates beautiful content. Yes, people who have that disease maybe will be interested to follow that account, but will they be interested enough to actually pay a subscription for it? I think there will be much, much less of them. So in the end, those people aren't going to make, it's not going to be a monetization model that's going to be able to support those creators. It's still better to have that option at all rather than not to have it, because so far, Instagram was happy to take everybody's content and people were happy to create it. hoping that they will be able to make some money, maybe off of paid cooperations with brands and things like that. But even now, on Instagram, the way that people make money, or on YouTube, right, the way that people make money is, yes, like you can make some additional money based on ads, but like most creators make their money based on cooperations with brands that actually pay them for, product placements and kind of showing the brand in the way that they want. It's not actually the tipping jar, or it's not the subscriptions that are, or like, the monetization part that's provided by the platform that's actually providing people with the money that they would need to be able to live and survive of being creators. Except for China, like I said, because there's the cultural difference where people actually do love to, like give those stickers and emojis that like you have to pay for. So every time that you want to support somebody with like a little heart or flowers or candy or whatever, like the little emoji, you actually like put money behind that. So it's like a completely different approach. And I think Instagram is not going in that direction here. It's trying a different model.
Can I chime in?
Oh,
Oh, I'm
you
sorry.
go first. No, you go first, David. I'll go next.
No, no, please go ahead.
Oh, no. You go first. I can't wait. Go ahead.
No, seriously. No, really. Go
Oh, now
ahead.
we're extremely like
For serious, yeah, for seriously, really.
yeah. So I wanted to say but the thing is, it's not up to the user as far as like me for instance, like if someone chooses to make creation their main mode of getting of making a living, that's not up to the person that's going to the platform. If I don't want to see ads, then that's up to me. It's up to the creator to be creative and to think of ways for that information to get out, because it almost seems like the onus is on the platform as well as on me as someone who as the audience. That's upon the creator. I mean, it's if that's what they want to do, then they have to be creative in figuring out how to get their voice out there and how to get around that stuff. If I want to read about celiac disease, then I would have to google it in. It's almost like that's the price that you would pay. I think there's like an adage or a story where the farmer has to pay, like for him to grow and have these crops and have these animals. The fox will take a couple of chickens or wolves, but that's the price you pay in nature. It's the same thing here. If you want to live off creation, you're gonna have to hustle. It's a hustle. It's hard. Tyler has how many platforms that you're on, and then you're pushing your stuff out there because you know that you can't use one thing to do the revenue. You have to be creative, and I mean, I don't think it should be up to the platform or the audience to figure that out. I mean, they gave them the tools and everything. Now it's up to them, and they've given us the onus to not want to see those ads. I'm somebody that doesn't want to be bombarded by marketing.
When you have
So
20% taken by the platform, you might feel somewhat differently.
But that's your
I
part that you pay to use the platform, though.
so I built a self-publishing platform like 13 fargan years ago in the game space, and I will tell you, there's a long way to go on the Instagram self-publishing user experience to go. I, and the fact that they're only allowing 10 people, that's their alpha. I like, seriously. That's not, you don't really measure. You measure a very small number of things with 10 content creators that already have, they probably already. I haven't analyzed the 10 that they chose. I'm assuming that they're all kind of mega influencers. You learn nothing, essentially. You learn about some of the things that you're describing, but microtransactions. This is such a great conversation. And Magda brought up the point about in certain Chinese apps you can like give little. You have to pay for them, but you can kind of throw money at people with the different little things that you can do. Those are microtransactions. Those are great, and I think that's part of what Netta's point was as well. But Netta, I would simply say that the conversation with regards to what is what we're able to do now, what the excitement is for content creators with NFTs and the conversation is to kind of a lot more people are rolling up their sleeves. I would say, but also just to create richer, more valuable content, which in Instagram, that's not the context. People don't go there to take classes, right? So, I mean, we'll have to see how that evolves. I think Tyler, you brought up some really great points with regards to music. That's a rich area that people already it's in the human mind. I mean, they're ready to pay for this or that, and they have been. So that's a great space, and that's in this NFT space. There are people that are already starting to create monetizable experiences in the production of the content, like in movie production or like music production. But when I looked, I took a quick glance at the IG alpha test, and I got to tell you, I just have to say it because, if they cared about content creators and actually learning how to help content creators start and build and just really build a business, that test would be very different. So perhaps they are doing, maybe that's just a press release and they're doing a whole lot more to help somebody with 5 followers get to 5,000 to 50,000 followers. But that's really, they need to do that pretty quickly, in my opinion, because I think there's going to be some other opportunities where people are going to just go somewhere else to get a better return on their time. I mean, so anyways, I'm David on the Clubhouse side. I'm done speaking.
If I might just jump in for 2 seconds because I'm building stuff in the metaverse, volumetric, as well as the protocol public side of things. I think it is very clear that there's going to be that line that we've been talking about, the lines between government, social credit apps, um, private technocracy apps where you will pay the tax, to Elle's point, and I agree with her, that is the price that you pay, but you've got multiple apps that are going to then merge into the singularity with your identity, with your healthcare, and you will pay not only the tax of the platform but the tax of the government as well on all of those earnings, which is going to be a 50% share. And then the question is going to be, what are you getting from that government who's receiving, and those technocratic companies that are taking that tax? And then there will be the public owned side of things, which I we know that the user generated content for the most part on these platforms is regular people who are not making money, just in the same way on Spotify it's only the top 1% or a power law of 80-20, and everybody else is effectively not making any money at all. It's massively deflationary. So I think we will have to see people being able to publish and own that information and publish to these other sites.
Is it just me not hearing, or is everybody else not
Yeah,
hearing?
No, I don't.
It went
Tyler's been
quiet.
muted.
Yeah, we're
well,
quiet.
bounce.
That was a mic drop moment.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so
It's 12:31. Are we gonna move to other topics?
all right, I go into the next topic. The next one is in a here it is right here. Amazon will launch Amazon Style, its first physical fashion store in Los Angeles later this year. Customers can use an app to send items to the fitting room by scanning QR codes on the mannequins or on the items. And the next is from Reuters that Russia's central bank proposes banning the trading, use, and mining of cryptocurrencies in Russian territory, citing threats to financial stability. Russia's central bank on Thursday proposed banning the use of mining and cryptocurrencies on Russian territory, citing threats to financial stability. Next is from CNN. Red Cross says a cyber attack on a vendor for over 60 Red Cross and Red Crescent societies compromised the personal data of 500,000 people, highly vulnerable people. And AT&T begins its 5G C-band rollout in 8 U.S. metro areas, including Austin, Chicago, after delaying rollouts around airports due to safety concerns. And Bloomberg says there are internal emails happening at Google where Google is creating a unit for blockchain and other distributed tech, led by engineering VP Shivakumar Venkataraman. Google forming a group dedicated to the blockchain and related technologies. Bloomberg says Crypto.com confirms that it suffered a cybersecurity breach. Google says it will transition organizations using the legacy G Suite free edition to a Google Workspace paid edition starting July 1st. So no more free business Gmail, so to speak. And Financial Times says they have sources that Andreessen Horowitz plans to raise like $3.5 billion for its latest cryptocurrency fund and up to $1 billion for a fund focused on seed investments in digital asset startups. And research finds the base of global music subscribers grew to 524 million by the end of 2021, up 26.4% year over year. Spotify's market share dropped from 33% to 31% for 2021, which means there's a whole bunch of new music services, basically. And so their market share could go down, but they could still be growing quite significantly. Wall Street Journal says they have sources that in recent weeks, CEO Bobby Kotick suggested Activision Blizzard make an acquisition. We read that one yesterday, so we can stop with the top 10. Those are the top 10. And now we can go into some of the tweets that y'all have been sharing. Like this one from BB, that a woman saves her own life by calling 911 on her AirPods after falling. She says, I would have died. Susan Putman was working on her studio alone when she tripped and fell and was able to call for help using Siri through her AirPods.
I think
And
maybe that's because the phone is not near her. But I doubt. Yeah, maybe other like Google's Alexa something else can do this as well. But because she will, yeah.
Apple Watch, I had this happen on my Apple Watch a month ago where I fell down at 3 a.m, took a nasty tumble, and my watch started calling. It said it was about to. I could feel it on my wrist making a big haptic vibration, and it was about to call 911 on my behalf because I had fallen, and I had to stop it from calling it with my other hand. So,
So do you like the usage or not?
yeah, that could have been a lifesaver. That was fantastic. Like if I was in a car accident, it would have called 911 automatically. Or if I was, even more elderly than I am, then it would have, and I had fallen and broken my hip or something. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Then
I was so people.
Yeah,
from
can you imagine like if you could use that for if there's like an assault happening for a woman if they have that watch,
mhm,
like, and it can call for help.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Yeah, you can call for the police, even anonymously. Yeah.
yeah.
You
Katarina.
can do that with the automation piece on your iPhone. Create that, and that would be triggered from your iWatch.
Yeah. Katerina shares the next one from nature.com that the biological cleanups that could combat age related disease could targeting autophagy, often linked to a cellular trash management system, extend life. Some researchers are unconvinced. And it's about how there's teams working around the world to figure out aging on a cellular level and deconstruct it and everything. Good articles. I just retweeted that one to the Tech News Twitter account. And then Evan shares one about a 9-year-old who's launching a denial of service attacks against schools. 9-year-old kids are launching denial of service attacks against schools. Britain's computer crime cops are targeting youngsters as young as 9 years old in an attempt to dissuade them from shutting down their schools. Lovely. Next one's from BB. From the BBC, should bad science be taken off social media? A Royal Society report recommends against censoring scientific misinformation online. When it comes to understanding science and making health decisions, it can have life and death consequences. And the next one's from Eric about a mouse who got totally jacked. Quadrupling muscle mass in mice by targeting the TGF signaling pathways. And it shows this incredibly buff mouse next to their sibling who wasn't targeted in a similar way. Very interesting tweet. So I'm
That
I love how they
episode
use.
that I was gonna say, remind me of that episode of Tom and Jerry where Jerry got jacked up.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool because I think I'm not sure if it's clear from the post, but the researcher I think included Chris Evans in the publication from Captain America showing the difference between the two mice. And it's kind of a little unnerving because then you see all the skin removed, so you see the muscle tissue, but it is like 4 times more jacked because they reduced the expression of myostatin, I think it's pronounced. So that's really interesting and has great implications for not only like livestock, but also for folks who are undergoing certain procedures or have certain diseases where maintaining your weight is a huge thing. I know before my cancer surgery that maintaining my weight was really difficult, and there were all sorts of drugs that could have been administered and so on. So I remember just eating a lot and struggling with it, and if there could have been any sort of reduction in difficulty, I would have very much appreciated because, fortunately, before my cancer surgery, I had chemotherapy, and the thing with chemotherapy is don't eat your favorite food because then you'll hate that food for the rest of your life. So, yeah, thanks.
Can you imagine jacked up New York City rats and pigeons? Ugh.
I think. Okay.
Hey, what are you looking at?
What about
What
jacked
about
up?
gym rats?
Yeah.
That's will
What
be the new drugs for the
I
athlete.
see what you did there.
what about jacked up chickens from KFC?
Don't they already
Isn't
have
it?
those? The hormone chicken and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about using it on animals. People I see great, but I wouldn't want jacked up animals, especially ones I eat.
We're all jacked up animals.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
quote of the night right there, Nicholas. So the next one I just pinned to the top of the clubhouse room from CNBC News that the CIA says that Havana syndrome not result of sustained campaign by a hostile power. In about 2 dozen cases, however, the agency, the CIA, can't rule out foreign involvement, including many of the cases that originated at the U.S. Embassy in Havana beginning in 2016. In a new intelligence assessment, the CIA has ruled out that the mysterious symptoms known as Havana syndrome are the result of a sustained global campaign by a hostile power aimed at hundreds of U.S. diplomats and spies. 6 people briefed on the matter told NBC News. In about 2 dozen cases, the agency cannot rule out foreign involvement, including many of the cases that originated at the U.S. Embassy in Havana beginning in 2016. Another group of cases is considered unresolved. But in hundreds of other cases of possible symptoms, the agency found plausible alternative explanations. The sources said the CIA declined to comment. The idea that widespread brain injury symptoms have been caused by Russia or other foreign power targeting Americans around the world, either to harm them or to collect intelligence, has been deemed unfounded, the sources said. People who have experienced possible Havana syndrome symptoms and have been briefed on the assessment have expressed deep disappointment, the sources said. Some have pointed out that the CIA findings are considered an interim assessment and that they were not coordinated with other agencies, including the Defense Department. Quote, CIA just kind of struck out on their own, a person briefed on the findings said in a statement. A group that represents U.S. officials have reported suspected incidents said that the CIA's newly issued report may be labeled interim, and it may leave open the door for some alternative explanation in some cases, but to scores of dedicated public servants, their families and colleagues, it has a ring of finality and repudiation. Quote, we have reasons to believe the interim report does not even represent the consensus of the full CIA, says a group of advocacy of victims of Havana syndrome, instead reflecting the views of a subset of officials most interested in resolution and closure. Okay.
It's interesting
So they're
to
admitting
note
it's
that.
not a foreign entity
Well,
that's doing
this is what I said
it.
last time the subject came up a few days ago was whoever's doing this in China, my hat goes off to you if you're able to pull this off in mainland China, because they're going to know about it. So how is it happen? There are cases in China, and there are cases all
Can you
over.
just, you
So
need to read the first line of that again because there's a key
Sustained.
Yeah.
word. There's a key word in the first line, Tyler, of what you
mysterious.
read. This their statement.
Mis-
No,
no.
it was hostile power. That's the operative, right? Read it again for using that, and you'll see that's where your answer is.
See, I would think also sustained is a key word there because it could be intermittent. But there are technologies. I remember famously Chris Jung, the late Chris Jung, actually spoke to me about this just by virtue of having a similar technology that I work on. Microwave ablation is a type of technology that enables these kind of effects or side effects. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility. And it may also be the case that there is something less nefarious. It could be that there are certain interferences or regions where just the technology that we use to communicate can create certain of these effects in people who are already predisposed to being at risk for these kinds of effects. So I would definitely not rule out wordplay in there, but it's not necessarily conclusive. But again, it also took a long time for us to demonstrate that cancer was caused by smoking, right? I remember famously there was a movie called Thank You for Smoking, and they said their scientists could disprove gravity. So you can always play legal gymnastics with these sorts of problems as well.
Okay.
I actually read that article. The only thing I walked away with was realizing that we still don't know what's going on with those people there. What happened to them?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to leave it hanging there mysteriously and join again tomorrow for our Friday edition. So I do hope you join us. And thank you, Nicholas, for jumping in on that facial recognition, ID.me, IRS kookiness. And
I'd
It's
like to
all
add
coming
something.
together, isn't it? Isn't it cohering? Is that, don't you feel that since the last year, we've seen so many of these subjects just all coming to this singularity, which is either we're going to have to go with the corporate world and the government world, or there has to be just an alternative for the people. It just seems like it's inevitable. Don't you feel that at this
Yep.
point?
I do.
I was going to ask the very first article you had about Clubhouse and the thing, I think because we're tech news and I was back channeling some of the ladies, I think we should probably have a separate conversation about that if possible under tech news to talk further about that and invite, if Tyler or Cheryl, if you can invite the Clubhouse. I guess influencers, I guess Clubhouse influencers, some of them, and then also Clubhouse representatives to that room so we can have a discussion about it and offer them the suggestions. And of course, don't mod everyone.
Cal Patel will be the best person to do that.
Yeah, Cal would be
Yeah.
great for that because the
Is
whole
Cal listening in Twitter
He's
Spaces?
he's very strong about this clubhouse thing.
the whole
Yeah.
article.
See,
It's hard to uh, have that conversation without the BBC article that we're reading. The more I read it, the more I realized that this is a strongly Indian politics issue.
True, 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 true. Because there are cultural stuff. Because I have women coming that come into my spaces asking for advice on different things. So yeah, there's a cultural aspect, but then it doesn't, make it any less, truthful, because there is, there are some people in here who use one, the blocking feature as a troll mechanism, and two, people who have tried to harm people in the IRL because, some of us, we are open books and we have our information out there and we do have our LinkedIn's connected to our, to our profiles and stuff like that. I mean, even me, I go under an anagram. So this is not my actual name. I don't have my LinkedIn attached. My Instagram and Twitter are just public profiles. Nothing's attached to privacy, but other people are not necessarily that cautious. So, I mean, there should be a conversation around that. And it would be nice if, tech news, if we could have a separate
Yeah,
room about that whenever we have time.
check it with Cal if he's up for it.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. See you all tomorrow, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.
Thank
Take
you.
Thanks,
care.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Tyler.
Tyler. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Thanks,
everybody.
Cheryl. Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tyler.
Tyler.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Cheryl.